Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Matt Connerton, and with me to my right, as always, the Honorable Gary S. Hopper. Oh, someone off camera is disparaging. So someone is disparaging your good name.
I know. I went and picked him up and brought him over here, and then he's picking on me. He's hurting my feelings.
No good deed goes unpunished.
That's right.
And he drank half your coffee.
And he drank my iced coffee. Yeah, he's a cotton picker.
You gave iced coffee to a child?
Yes.
You're
Well, he's
going
not- No. That's a grandchild. His mother's going to regret it.
Oh, yes, right. That's right, because you get to give it back later.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So I'm in a kinder, gentler mood tonight, so I brought my kinder, gentler hand grenade.
Yes.
The more humane hand
Smooth
grenade.
hand grenade.
Yes,
Much more humane.
much nicer and kinder and more genteel. The kinder, gentler Gary Hopper.
What is it that makes it more humane? Is it filled with bubble gum or something?
Yeah,
Like
I think so. I think
kinda
what
fun.
happens is they throw it and there's just like puff bunnies float out.
Really?
And
Oh, how fun.
spread kindness or something. But
Yeah.
that's according to the Geneva Convention. The pineapple ones are inhumane, and these round ones are humane.
Yes.
So there's got to be something.
Well, some people are allergic to pineapple.
Yeah,
that's why.
maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just the allergy factor.
Yes.
But anyway, so I'm a little bit distressed.
Uh-oh.
Uh,
Uh-oh.
yeah, I got a case of political whiplash yesterday.
Oh, this already sounds like a good story.
I'm probably gonna file a claim against National Propaganda Radio.
Really?
Right, because it was stressed me out. I think I get PS. What did we talk about last week?
Oh, post-traumatic PTSD? Yeah.
PTSDs because I was listening to Rush Limbaugh and about talking about how that story about Romney going into the food chain down south, and how he went in there and he could just press buttons, and then he goes to the next station and his sandwich is ready, and how in the his point was that in the private sector, advancing things and making technology work for you is what they do because that's how business works. Whereas in the public sector, he was talking to an optometrist who was trying to move, or ophthalmologist who was trying to move his business from one side of town to the other, and it was just a change of address, and the 30 pages of work he had to do, and it still delayed all payments to him for about a month, which can be a lot of money.
Yeah.
And he's just talking about that chasm between the private sector and the public sector. But I forget whether it was NBC or CBS when they reported it. It was they were trying to make it a Bush Senior kind of moment, as in he was aghast at amazed by this new technology, like he was out of touch.
Oh, really?
And they edited the program so it sounded like that.
Yeah.
But that's not what he was talking about. It was
Right.
taken entirely out of context to try to embarrass him.
Right.
So I switched from that, because it's an advertisement, to NPR, and they were doing a story that was glorifying divorce. And it's just like this whiplash of going from conservative to liberal. It's just it hurt my brain.
Glorifying it in what way? What do you mean?
Now, there's probably more to the story than that, but I had to switch it off before I shot my radio on my truck.
Yeah.
And no, it was it was a woman who had written a story, or wrote a story about the moment when her epiphany that her marriage had come to an end was when she got her pictures back from the child's birthday. And there was no pictures of her. Her husband had only taken pictures of the children and the birthday cake and the present, and she was out of the picture entirely. And she was so upset by that she was no longer. And I'm thinking, what a selfish. That is so profoundly childish, so profoundly selfish. And NPR was, oh, you poor thing, that's terrible. And with no consequence to what is her decision going to do to those kids?
Right.
It's going to devastate those children because she wasn't in a set of pictures. It's like, wow. Have we become such a selfish society that that's actually a plausible argument?
In some sections. In some sections of society.
So,
In fairness, I would want to hear the whole segment.
yeah, I couldn't. After that, after they were showing sympathy for her,
Right.
her not being in the picture when, if you're taking pictures of a kid's birthday, you're taking pictures of kids at a
Right,
birthday,
right. Yeah.
you know? Anyway, it was just amazingly selfish. It was profound, and she was just talking about how it worked out well. She thought she was going to end up in poverty, but she wrote this story, and she did well, and it was sickening. Anyway, let's see, what else did I want to talk? Oh, yeah, state Supreme Court, but talked a little bit about redistricting, and I think
Yeah.
somebody from Manchester and a few other places filed suit in the state Supreme Court to because they didn't believe that the way the House redistricted the districts was legal, constitutional.
Really?
And the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court today decided that the House had in fact balanced between the federal and the state constitutions well enough so that there is no reason to hear the case really.
Oh,
So
who had challenged it, the redistricting?
a few people. I know Valancourt was upset about it. I don't know if he challenged it, but
I wondered because I remember this was a while ago. I remember John Burt saying something about the redistricting wasn't going to work out well for Valancourt, and that's why he had an issue.
I don't know. Valancourt gets in anyway. I don't think that he has to worry about it. But at any rate, the Supreme Court decided that there wasn't enough basic deviation federally or in the state, because that was the problem. They had to. There's a certain amount of deviation you're allowed, and you had to balance that between that and the federal, and it was very difficult to actually do redistricting.
Huh.
And they did a pretty good job. They gave me a decent district, so I don't care.
Yeah.
Because I'm a selfish jerk like the lady in the pictures. Let's see. Redistricting passes. Oh, this is another one that's very, very horrible. You remember, I think it was like a year or two ago, there was a guy up north who broke into his grandfather's cabin and stole a handgun from his grandfather, where his granddad had it kept, and went to a local Army-Navy store to rob it and ended up killing somebody, and then some other people came in, they got shot.
Yeah.
And so one of the victim's parents or whatever is filed the suit, and in New Hampshire they said, no, that's not a case. I mean, the kid broke into the grandfather's house to steal the gun. Their grandfather can't be held liable for that.
Oh, they tried to sue the grandfather?
Yes. So that didn't work, so they're bringing it to trying to change it to a federal court in Boston.
Yeah. I wish I were surprised,
I know.
but you hear about this kind of thing.
Well, the whole premise is ridiculous.
Yeah,
That's like
it is, yeah.
that's like somebody breaks the window of your car, steals your car, drives down the road, sees somebody they hate, runs them over, and then you're held liable for it.
Right. But you hear stories like that where people sue and even win.
I know, it's horrible.
Occasionally, it's very bizarre. It's a strange world we live in.
It is really bizarre because I know when my grandson Damon gets older, when he's 18, if he's responsible, he's not doing drugs and all that junk, I'm going to let him know where the key to the guns are. So if he wants to go hunting or go out back shooting, he can do it.
Right.
So does that, if something happens, does that make me liable? I don't think so.
In the eyes of some people, it does.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. But anyway, so that was on the news.
You know what you hear
Let's see.
stories about is somebody breaks into someone's home and they get hurt while breaking into someone's home, and then
Oh yeah, they sue,
the
yeah,
lady.
because they didn't put a floor maybe wet or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like. I think that was pretty much it. We have Janine, and I've forgotten your last name because I got brain damage.
Yeah, Petrel.
Petrel. Jean.
Can you just pull that mic a little closer?
Now are you from where? Because you've got a New Boston or something phone exchange.
Yes, I ended up getting that because I couldn't afford the Ware phone exchange.
Oh,
So
really?
I needed something. I went voice over IP. That's why I ended up with a different one.
Oh.
But I'm in Ware. I'm
Yeah. Okay. Just usually that's 529. So.
yeah. I've been there for 14 years.
Wow. Okay. Now what's voice over IP?
Like Vonage.
And that's how expensive is that?
That's about $20 a month.
I was gonna
Really?
say, I see the ads all the time. It looks like it's pretty cheap. Does it
Yeah.
work well?
Yep,
Yeah.
worked great. You talked to me on the phone. Yeah, it worked great.
Didn't you get cut? We cut out.
Yeah, but that doesn't. I don't know if that was the phone or not. I don't know. Why.
Oh, now I'm getting a little skeptical about Vonage. I don't know. I think I know why it's
I
so
don't use
cheap.
Vonage, but yeah,
Well-
it's the same type of thing.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Whatever.
Maybe you should use Vonage.
I don't know.
Uh,
I was talking to her, boom, and went dead. I don't know.
know.
You know, maybe because she's calling, using Granite State wires. They
Who knows?
Could be.
You know.
Could be anything.
could be anything.
You should sue someone. Someone should be.
Sue,
held
yeah, you
liable for
should be
that.
sued too. Yeah, when I'm done suing NPR for my political distress, then maybe we can use the same lawyer to sue Granite State for something. No.
I'm not too concerned. No.
Well, give it all the consideration it deserves.
Yes, exactly.
did.
You did.
Wow. She's efficient.
Yes, she's efficient.
Yes.
Brutally efficient.
Yes.
Yes.
I
Yes.
have 4 children. I have to be brutally efficient.
I guess so. I guess so.
Anyway, she's here to talk about homeschooling, and you're a homeschooler. You're a teacher. And how long did you teach in the public schools?
10 years,
10 years.
but I've been certified for 25 years.
How old are your kids?
My oldest is 18.
So you've really been certified for 18 years.
Well, I've been certifiable maybe for 18
Yeah.
years.
That'll do it. It does it. No, that's what I was thinking. Anyway, so so you were a public school teacher, right? Mm-hmm. And then you had your own children. You said, wait a second, this
I can only do one full-time job,
right?
and I chose being home with my kids because my 2 oldest are only 18 months apart. So
Right.
it was such a trying to get all them to where they need to be, and then I was thinking about them while I was at school, and I was thinking about school while I was at home, and I just said I can't
Yeah.
do both. And then we moved down to Nashua. We were living in Maine at the time. And my husband got a job that was enough that I could afford to stay home. So
That's really good. That's a huge piece of that puzzle, because I know when my children were young, my wife stayed home, but it was expensive. You know.
Well, and-
Yeah,
and
it's
you,
hard.
You need to sacrifice. I mean, you got to be willing to realize that vacations are few and far between, and you run the car until it physically won't run anymore.
Yeah, when you're pushing it down the street, it's time to
And then you go find a car that is just a little bit above what you just got rid of.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so if you're willing to make the sacrifices, it's not that bad.
Yeah, no, it was tough. I mean, I don't like really doing mechanical stuff, but I still had to, like replace the rear end of the Subaru by myself, and that was pretty dangerous and fun, and stuff like that. It's just
My husband's gotten pretty good at mechanics.
yeah. But it's like you said, it's sacrifice. Like, so if your husband took a bunch of pictures of one of the kids' birthday parties and he forgot to include you, and would that be justification for?
I probably would have avoided being in the pictures to begin with.
Ah, yes.
And that's when you said that, my first thought was, I know most of the moms I know, we're the ones behind the camera because we
Right.
try to avoid being in the pictures. And my husband usually says, you need to come and you need to be in the picture. Yes, dear.
Yes, dear.
So. No, we just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary.
Oh,
so
congrats.
Oh, congratulations!
Yep, thank you.
But yeah, that's having kids is a sacrifice. It's not. It's as cute as they are, at times. It's a lot of work. So you started homeschooling. Now, before we get into that a little bit, over the phone we were talking about the politics.
Okay.
Because last term, and I try to do this a little bit to give people a contrast between the mindset of a very liberal Democratic House we had last term compared to the very opposite end, not quite opposite, because more libertarian than Republican, but conservative for the most part.
Well, homeschooling, the last 5 years' history of homeschooling is a perfect contrast of that.
Okay.
Up till about 5 years ago, the procedure for homeschoolers was, in the beginning of the year, you sent in a letter of intent, and you included the children's name, address, birth date, and then you had to outline the curriculum you were going to use. Okay? And then at the end of the year, you did one of 3 types of evaluation. Either you had a certified teacher do the look over your portfolio, which is basically the kids' work for the year.
Yep.
Or you took a standardized test like the Iowas or the California Achievement Test, the kind we used to, the little dots we used to do in school.
Yeah, the number 2 pencil.
Yep, exactly. Or you could have a mutually agreed upon one. It could be the state test. It could be, there's many varying ways that you can do that as long as it's agreeable between the homeschooler and the school district.
But at the end of every year, you had to prove that, or is it every year or every quarter?
Every year. Every year.
Every year you had to prove that your child had become proficient or something in
It had
that.
to show. It had to show that there was a progress made commensurate with age and ability.
Right.
Okay, so about 4 years ago, we said, the curriculum is really not a good part of what we do, because what happens is there were 3 reasons that it wasn't a good thing. One was. One of the things about homeschooling is we change curriculum. I have multiple curriculums for all of my kids. It's not like where you go, everybody reads the same book, So we would, if it didn't work for our kids, it's kind of like a test drive on a car, After a while, you're like, no, wait a minute, this car isn't what I really, really wanted. So you change it. And there was no penalty for changing it. The second one is that the school couldn't say yes or no on your curriculum. So even if they didn't like what you were using for a curriculum, it didn't matter. They couldn't say, you can't do this. And the third one is that evaluators, my goal was I had to attest to that progress. It didn't make a difference to me how you got there. Mm-hmm. If you used your curriculum, great. If you used a totally different curriculum, that was fine too. So that was a complete waste of time and effort on the part of homeschoolers. So we said to the legislature, would you please change the regulations so that we can get rid of the curriculum requirement? Well, when we did that, we opened floodgates, and we did not realize we were opening floodgates, but we did. And that caused the head of the education committee to decide that they wanted to do a complete look-see and change what was going on with homeschooling. And they presented a bill, I believe it was 368, where it was going to make our homeschooling laws the most restrictive in the country.
Really?
We were going to be worse than Pennsylvania, New York, and Massachusetts. Okay? And we kind of sat there and said, wait a minute, the state that has live free or die,
Right.
they were going to make us do an evaluation and testing. Then we had to send it in, and the principals were going to, the districts were going to be able to decide whether it was appropriate or not. So we had no idea what the criteria was going to be. There was no objective criteria.
Right.
So you sent your paperwork in and hope for the best. So about 1,000 homeschoolers showed up at the hearing. I think we had to move to Representative Hall that day because it was so packed. And we were up at the State House multiple times. Many of us were, by the end of it, were going, okay, we've done enough field trips to the State House. We don't want to go back. And that was voted down. And it was voted down handily. I think it was like 270 to 69 or something. I mean,
Right. So there was you. In other words, homeschoolers put enough pressure on the legislature.
Yes.
So even the chairman of the education committee basically had to concede.
Well, yes, she had to concede, but she didn't necessarily concede.
She didn't go quietly into the night.
No, what she did is she wrote a letter basically telling the State Board of Education to please change the regulations to basically match what you guys had just voted down.
Wow.
We got a hold of that letter, we meaning the homeschooling community, and we made it aware of people like the minority leader of the House and said, this is what you just voted down. So that didn't fly.
Right, right.
And then what happened was the 2 bills came in last year.
Now
And
now we're talking Republic.
Right,
We've gone from the Democrats, who basically were going to feed you to the wolves,
Pretty much, yes.
because by a law like that, because I don't remember the specific debates. It's more than 10 minutes ago, so I don't remember. But in effect, it would, if you had a superintendent or whatever of a particular school district who did not like homeschooling, they could just reject whatever, or if they didn't like a Christian curriculum,
Yep.
they could reject you without any reasons why. They could just say, no, I don't think so.
Pretty much. and then they'd put you on probation, and it would have been a
Then you'd be on
disaster.
like double secret probation.
Yes.
No, I wish it was double secret probation, because they kind of ignore you on double secret probation.
Right.
No, you have to then prove all kinds of stuff, and it is not a fun experience to be on probation.
Yeah.
I've never been, but I've heard from other people that it's not a fun experience.
Right,
So,
right.
But the other thing is that it would then change from district to district.
Right.
So one district might be pro-homeschooling, and it's great, no problem, and another district might be anti-homeschooling, so it all depends on where you live. Now, how do you say that that's equal under the law? It isn't.
Right.
It left way too much up to the districts. So we got that voted down. Now, when the Republicans came in, we got 2 bills put through, and one was signed on June 13th, and the other one went through without a signature.
Okay.
The first one was House Bill 545. And what that basically said is, remember how I said we had to send that letter of intent in every year? We said, wait a minute, I'm still homeschooling. I'll let you know if I stop. Would you just let me do it once and be done with it?
Right.
And there are many states, I think there's 25 states, that you're basically one-time notification. And then if you change districts, or if you stop homeschooling, or if you add another child, then you send a letter saying, now I'm homeschooling this child, or...
Just so that the state has an understanding, that you have child A, B, and C,
Mm-hmm.
and they are being homeschooled, so that's why they're not reporting for,
Basically.
which is reasonable.
Right, and that one the governor signed into law, and that goes into effect on August 12th. And the other one was House Bill 1571, and what that did is that said that you still have to do evaluations, but you don't have to submit them. You just need to hold them in your files in case you decide to go into the public school. Or actually, I can read what it says. The parent shall maintain a copy of the evaluation. The results of the evaluation, A, may be used to demonstrate the child's academic proficiency in order to participate in public school programs or co-curricular activities which are defined as school district sponsored and directed athletics, fine arts, academic activities. Home-educated students shall be subject to the same participation policy and eligibility conditions that apply to public school students. It shall not be used as a basis of termination of home education program, and C, shall provide a basis for a constructive relationship between the parent and the evaluator, both working together in the best interest of the child. So basically, it's being used that if you've got a kid who wants to play football, and footballers have to be on the honor roll, then you need to show that how your child's doing. Right. But what was happening is every year, we had to submit this proof that we were not educationally neglecting our children.
Right.
Well, even at the hearings, the worst percentage they came out with me, well, there might be 1% of the kids that are not getting, the proper education. That's like saying, okay, 1% of the people of a restaurant might walk out drunk, so everybody has to take a breathalyzer test.
Right, yeah.
Of course they don't. They're supposed to be
The public schools, what percent are not receiving an adequate education?
Well, if you look at the test scores and you look at the proficiencies, it's usually around half or more that are not considered proficient. So, that's the way you.
So that argument really,
didn't hold a lot of water. And you'd be talking about, let's say we've got about 7,000 kids that are homeschooled in the state, but let's round it to 10 because I'm not the world's greatest math student. 1% of that is what, 100 kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, or no,
1% of
10,000 would be 1,000 kids. Sorry about that.
no, that would be 10%. 1% would be 100 kids.
I'm sorry, I did have it right. It's been a long day. A long, hot day. I was right the first time.
It is hot.
So you've got 100 kids. That's not even a grade
Right.
amount of kids in most schools.
Right. Yeah.
So you're talking 100 children. Why are we jumping through all the hoops and putting the other 9,900 people through all of this rigmarole
Right.
for this possible 100 children that we can't even verify exist?
Right.
Right.
So that's what got the and homeschoolers are an interesting group of people.
Yeah, that was one thing that was interesting to me. I told you on the way over here that when I first got into politics, I had some people at church that were homeschooling, and I presumed that most of the homeschoolers were people that didn't want their children being indoctrinated into the secular society or into the theory of evolution and all this stuff. They didn't want their kids being taught that. They wanted a more of a traditional Christian education, which was similar to the education you would have had 100 years ago,
Sure.
or probably even 50 years ago.
The Charlotte Mason, that's pretty much that type of education.
Right. And lo and behold, the people at church, they told me the same thing you did. It's just not that. It's quite eclectic.
Yeah. Getting a group of homeschoolers to all go in the same direction is a lot like herding cats.
Really? Yeah.
Because as I was telling Gary, the first real two groups that started homeschooling were fundamentalist Christians and the Mother Earth News, off the grid New Agers.
No kidding.
Those were the two major groups that started homeschooling at the beginning of
That's
the movement.
interesting. Yeah.
And when you get up there, you've got such an eclectic group of people. You've got homeschoolers from every religion, every race, every creed, every, socioeconomic. You've got single mothers. You've got executives. You've got every bit of the strata. That's
Yeah.
why getting all of us to the main thing we have in common is we homeschool.
Yeah.
And getting all of us to agree on anything is not easy.
Sure.
But we can agree that we want to be left alone.
Yeah.
We want the state out of our business. And
So how does that work now? So that must make some the profoundly liberal members of that group make their head almost explode, because on one hand, just by virtue of the fact of what they've seen politically in the state, they would tend to want to vote Republican so that they can be left alone, yet they're politically, they lean to the left and would rather vote for so do they just go to the polls and just have their brains explode, or what happened?
I honestly don't know, but I have met some of them, and they just are they're the same, the libertarian type of, just leave me alone.
Right.
It's my kids. We're going to do it my way. I'm a parent. I'm intelligent. Leave me alone. And we don't believe that it's the state's responsibility to educate our children. We believe it's our responsibility to educate our children. And
Haven't you read the Claremont decision?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how they got Cherish into pay for. I still have yet to figure that out. And I've also have yet to figure out where in the United States Constitution the Department of Education exists.
Yes.
Because neither of them, I teach U.S. Constitution and government at our homeschool group, so I get to play with the Constitution every year.
Yeah, we had that a constitutional amendment a few weeks ago.
The
CACR 12 with a
Yep.
constitutional amendment, and it basically conceded to the Supreme Court's point that the state was responsible for education, even though historically that has not been the case. Historically, the state has told the towns, it's your responsibility.
Right, it's always been local level.
It's always
Yeah.
local. So leadership wanted something through, so they were pushing this really, really hard. And
It was not well loved in the homeschool community, I can tell you that.
yeah, I didn't either. I didn't vote for it, even though I went in with an open mind. But constitutionally, I could not swallow it. Okay, because it conceded too much, and it's the slippery slope thing. Well, once you've conceded this, what's the Supreme Court going to decide next?
Yep.
So conceding that much right off the bat seemed really foolish. So I voted against it. But I was telling Matt, it was actually that night of the vote, a caller called in and said, "Oh, I saw you on TV." I says, "No way."
Oh, yeah.
I was during the vote, because I like to, like some people like to keep themselves busy. My eyes aren't really good enough to read it, but I'm sitting there looking at Shotgun News, right? And they pan over, and they zoom in, and it's the back of my neck, and I've got the Shotgun News open, and it's a lady with a shotgun.
And
It was
Okay.
it was awesome. That's
you-
that's like extra 50 votes in Ware if that gets out.
and you can't even say you read it just for the articles.
No, I can't. I can't read the article. 'Cause I just look through it. I just look at all the guns and see what the prices are. But that's about it. But it was just wicked funny. But I voted against that.
Yeah, because I mean, just, you go back to Mayberry versus Madison, you know, the Constitution is what we say it is, with the Supreme Court ruling. It's like, you know, judicial review. There's nothing in there for that, and there's nothing in there in the state constitution that says, guess what, you get to decide. The law is what we say it is, and it's not.
No,
So
no,
Claremont
that
should
would
never-
make basically the Supreme Court a super legislature.
Right.
Can we clarify the Claremont decision for anyone who doesn't know?
Oh, I'm sorry. You've read it.
Basically,
You're the educator. Educate us.
basically what Claremont said was Claremont was complaining they didn't have enough money for their schools. And I will admit, I have not read the exact, the whole
Yeah.
decision, but the gist was that they sued, saying that the state should provide an adequate education to all students in the state. So,
And therefore subsidize Claremont.
subsidized Claremont, basically. And in the Constitution, the New Hampshire Constitution, it says that we are to cherish education. And somehow, I still have yet to figure out how we got from cherish to pay for, but the court said we had to pay for it, and that it was the legislature's responsibility to define an adequate education and then
Then make
set
sure
up-
they set up enough money for
yeah,
it.
and set up the funding mechanics to provide it.
And the ridiculousness of that decision is, first of all, when this state started, the legislature told every town that you will take up, and I don't recall what the percentages want, say 5%, just for argument's sake, 5% of the property value of anybody in town collected together for the purpose of starting schools. And what that meant by definition is some smaller towns could only afford a teacher to come in 3 months out of the year. You know, some of the bigger towns or the wealthier towns could have schools and maybe a full-time, teachers and stuff like that. But by its definition, initially, there was always going to be disparities between the rich towns and the poor towns. And so that's what we started with. Okay, but that disparity, the court was trying to achieve a goal. They weren't analyzing things and finding out what was constitutional. They had a decision they wanted to make, and were basically,
They had a result and figured
they
out
had
how
a
to make-
result. How do we get there?
Yep.
And so they used the word cherish in the Constitution, where the state says we will cherish an education, and it also says we will cherish seminaries.
Yep.
And there's a few other things that it says we will cherish.
So that opens a big can of worms then.
Well, they kind of ignored that
They
part.
kind of ignored that part.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have said that, so that means you're going to start funding seminary schools, and they're like, no, that's different.
That's different. Yeah, because there's
Different
another
kind of cherish.
Yeah, that's a different kind of cherish. and so that's a Claremont decision, and the legislature has been working around a constitutional amendment to fix it ever since I've been up there, since 2000 when I first got elected.
That goes back a ways,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And
Did the
but
constitutional amendment pass?
no,
I didn't. Okay,
it did
I
not
didn't
pass,
think
which
so.
really upset leadership, and that's why you had our new majority leader up there saying that Solo's free staters and
Yes, okay. I do
yeah,
remember
yeah. So that was awesome. That was wicked fun, and I think Dave Hess blamed somebody, and the new majority leader blamed somebody, and the governor blamed somebody else, and
Well, that's what happens when you have a citizen legislature. I mean, we have the third largest legislature in the world. So it's just behind Parliament and Congress.
Yeah.
So when you've got that many people that have access to that many legislators, you're going to hear from the people, and if that's not what the people want, then it's going to reflect through our legislators.
Yep.
Right.
yeah. I mean, on stuff like that, I kind of balance it out because on one hand, there's a legitimate argument that you should vote for it and let the people decide. On the other hand, it was so unconstitutional, I couldn't vote for it regardless of whether I use that justification or not, so I voted against it. But anyway, so homeschooling. Damon, if you want to come sit with us, if you're all done reading that, you can. And you're not what? Okay. So homeschooling, we got past the legislation part. Your legislature has done helped homeschoolers
Yes.
this past 2 years.
Yes, they have, and
And
they
hope-
are very happy. It's a very happy community right now.
Happy community. So if somebody wants to how would somebody go about homeschooling their own kids? This is it's not a simple thing.
No. It's not a simple thing, and it's simple to do, but it's not an easy thing to do. Basically, you decide you're going to homeschool, and you submit your letter of intent, or if your child needs to have it. We don't have to submit until the kids are 7. So,
Okay.
and then you have to decide one way or the other. But if you pull your kids out of school, and then you set up a curriculum and have at it. And there's so many support groups around that you're not going in blind. If there are email lists. There's the New Hampshire Homeschooling Coalition.
Now, what's that?
That's
Is that the one you're part of, or
well, it's basically the state group.
right?
Okay, they're the ones that keep everybody abreast of the laws and that kind of stuff, and they have a presence on the Homeschool Education Advocacy Committee, which is a division, something from the legislature, okay, that works with the State Board of Education. So they're kind of the info folks. If you want to
Yeah.
know what's going on in homeschooling in New Hampshire, check with the coalition. But then you also have smaller groups. For example, the co-op I mentioned, First Agape Co-op in Auburn. You've got the Relaxed Homeschoolers of New Hampshire. You've got CHEN, which is the Christian Homeschoolers of New
What's the
Hampshire.
relaxed homeschoolers? Those seem like cool people.
It's basically
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
relaxed. I'm not speaking for them because I'm not one of their. I am connected with them, but I'm not one of their
Yeah.
top people, so I don't want to speak specifically for them. But it's basically, what I got was that it was a group of homeschoolers that there's no Christian, or you don't have to be a specific type of homeschooler. For example, in Christian home education, CHEN, okay, those are Christian. You've got a Catholic there, so that's basically for the Catholics. So it's more of a everybody who can come, and we'll help organize field trips. They organize group activities and that kind of thing. So it's not so much a structured group as in we meet every week type thing. It's more of a group of homeschoolers getting together to connect to do field trips and group activities and connect with other homeschoolers.
Yeah.
You know, I'm having trouble teaching such and such. You have a curriculum that might, does anybody know a good curriculum for first year algebra for a student who's not really a good math student?
Right.
And then other homeschoolers will say, oh, you may want to try this curriculum, or you might want to try that curriculum, or here are the positives of this curriculum, that type of thing. So it's more of a support group as opposed to the co-op that I go to. We meet 2 days a week at the First Assembly of God Church in Auburn.
Right.
And we have classes set up there. There's another one in Loudon called Lighthouse, which is another co-op like that. Ware has its own co-op group that meets at least once a month for the mixed classes, and then they've been meeting every other week. We just did a little drama presentation called Peggy and Petey, the Pint-Sized Pirates. So we had all the younger kids. I think the oldest ones were like 12. And so that was their drama class, and they had a Lego class, a Lego experiment class, and the Courier Art Museum came and did crafts with the kids.
Yeah.
And pottery and painting, and so they do a lot. But and those are just the ones that I know of specifically.
Yeah.
I know there are some on the Seacoast, and there's really a lot of homeschooling groups all over the state, so it's really easy to connect with other homeschoolers.
Yeah.
Now, is it also true that as a homeschooler, because you live in Ware, you're paying taxes in Ware, you still have access to, like if your kid wanted to join the baseball teams and stuff like that,
Yep.
and to integrate into the schools somewhat
As
to
much
use
or
their
as little as you want, yeah.
Yeah.
With one exception, they don't provide special education services.
Right.
But that's the choice of the district. Some districts do, some districts don't. Ware doesn't happen to.
Right.
But-
But so if your kid wants to be in football,
Yep.
being homeschooled does not mean you're
No. In fact, 2 of the kids, I think it was on the JV team at the high school for soccer last year, are homeschoolers.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yep. I think the goalie. I'm pretty sure that one of them was the goalie and another one I think was a forward.
Okay.
But, yeah, they were playing JV last year.
Wow.
I know another one in Leominster, he was the star kicker for the football team. So
Yeah.
if you want to get on the wrestling team, I talked to someone about my youngest son. He's in middle school, and I said, well, he needs an outlet.
Right.
Can you beat him up, was the question?
No,
No,
but
no.
I'd like him to, he loves to wrestle, but I'd like him to be able to wrestle with some, instruction and rules and that kind of stuff. And he said, sure. Because the guy who, at least not this past year, but the year before, the gentleman who was doing the wrestling at the middle school was a homeschooler.
Okay.
So we're in all over the place, and
Yeah.
that's as far as I know. There's no problem with doing that's why they said that in order of proficiency to participate in public school programs. And I know kids that have taken 1 or 2 classes at the school, like maybe come in for an art class or a music class if they're musically inclined and they want to be
Right.
in band. I know some have come to the high school for band or the middle school
Right.
for band.
Yeah, because there's a lot of that stuff that it becomes impractical to, if the kid wants to play football, to actually have enough kids for even a football team.
Right,
Right,
and,
yeah.
and actually, if I remember correctly, one of our seniors, I think, was the captain of the Concord football team this
Oh,
year.
really?
One of the seniors we graduated from. I'm pretty sure he was, but I know that there are homeschoolers in all kinds of local school. And if you want to be in a play, we happen to have a theater class, a fantastic theater class. They did the Mad Adventures of Mr. Toad was their musical for last year, and they had a blast with it. But if you decide you want to get in, I know some of them have gone. I think it's to
John Stark.
I know some have gone to like Pembroke Academy and done
The
drama
lady
there.
the lady that did the theater classes at John Stark was award-winning for quite a few years. I don't know if she's still there,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
but yeah, that's something people have to consider, is if they want to do homeschooling. It's not, you're taking these children into a dark room and keeping them away from society.
No. In fact, I was the gentleman in the last show before this
Lord,
asked me
yeah.
about socialization, and you saw the first thing I did. I sighed, and
I
it's,
could tell by your reaction that you get asked that a lot. I'm
that's
sure, yeah.
always the first question
Yeah.
that comes just about out of everybody's mouth after, is it legal?
Right.
And most people have figured out that it's legal now. So,
Right.
but don't.
So
do
we're
we get-
advancing.
Let's do it. Yes. Do we get proper socialization? And as I said, most of the time, the biggest problem we have with socialization is we're never home. Because we're in 4-H and Scouts and church groups and bands and dancing and theater and
How are they going to learn to sell drugs or become an entrepreneur, as you would call it?
we'll figure out other ways. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
Well, give it all the consideration it deserves. I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Didn't ignored it.
Right. Very efficient.
Because there's a lot of stuff they learn in public schools that you just can't get at homeschooling.
Well, and a lot of reason that, to an extent, that's a lot of reason why some people homeschool is because they don't want
Really?
all of that being taught.
All the baggage that goes with it?
Yeah, there's a couple of YouTube videos with the 12 days of homeschooling.
Yeah.
And they talk about all of the misnomers. What about the prom? Well, my daughter went to a prom. They did a homeschool prom. They do it every year.
Well, actually, wouldn't if the kids graduating, wouldn't they be eligible to go to the high school prom anyway?
They would, but if they wanted to, I guess. I don't know if, I assume they could go with someone at the high school.
Right.
Our kids are I've never had to deal with that.
Yeah.
But my son graduated high school with 6 college credits because they did the Running Start classes and they're still doing those at the co-op.
Right.
He took psychology and philosophy.
Her son got in touch with me on Facebook because he wanted to get active in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, well, something simple to do is to start calling around and let people know. I guess he doesn't like that too much.
He said,
People hanging up on him.
Oh, really?
He said, I'm not going into advertising. He doesn't do the cold calls,
Yeah,
but no, he's always loved politics,
Yeah.
and so I got a hold of Gary and said, hey, Gary, you're better at this than I am. You go ahead and tell him which direction to go in, and he's loving it. He's enjoying himself, and he went to Teen Pack that's they do in Concord every year. That's basically like kind of a boy state, girl state kind of thing for a week, except that they
okay.
don't stay over.
Yeah.
Right.
It is Christian based, but it's they talk about how state government works. They went over to the State House and they go visit
wow.
them, and yeah, it's a great course for a week, and my son just loved it.
Yeah.
So now he wants to go to Tallahassee for Teen Pack Congress, and
Oh,
I'm
really?
like, yeah, and how do you propose we're going to pay for this? So he's now got himself a job, so that's
Yeah.
part of what he's going to be saving for this summer is to
Yeah.
go to Teen Pack Congress in Tallahassee.
Well, good for him.
What is that again?
It's Teen Pack Congress. It's they get together and they basically have a national legislature.
Right. Oh, okay,
And,
okay. It's like a faux kind of. They just
Yep.
kind of set it up. Wow.
And they've had bills and stuff like that. And actually, they had to draft a bill, and his bill was to make us a single notification, no evaluation state for homeschooling. That was
Yeah.
his bill.
Huh.
And so it didn't get through, but it also was 3.5 pages long. So I think a lot of kids looked and went, "That's an awfully long bill." And
If they only knew, right?
I told him, I said,
Well,
go to-
actually, in New Hampshire, the bills really aren't typically very long.
No.
Really? Yeah.
they're actually quite
No,
short.
it's not like, well, see, what happens with Congress and the federal level is they pack everything together.
Yeah.
You know, they'll have, like we had, I forget how many bills this year, 1,800 or something like that, this last 2 years. And so they'll take, 50 of them and put them in this bill, and 40 of them and put them in this bill. And what it does is it allows, well, Gary Hopper wants this bill through. Well, if we give him what he wants, then he'll vote for the package and the pack, so
Yeah.
that's how you end up with all this crap that,
That's why the health care bill also involved the takeover of the student loan industry.
Yeah.
just coincidentally.
Yeah.
That was coincidence.
But that's how it's done down there. But yeah, it was a really good week for him there, and now he wants to go to the national level
Yeah.
and take a look at what that is. And
Oh, that's really cool.
so he's all.
I don't know why you would send him in my direction. I am really not a politician. I'm not very good at it, but
No, but you know a lot of people who are. So
you didn't have to agree to that.
I know, right?
no, you are a very good.
Oh, yeah,
you are
yeah.
a very good representative. There's a difference between being a representative and being a politician, and I'd much rather be represented by a representative than a politician.
That was a very political
She
explanation.
was very good.
Yeah.
You should
Go into
bailed
politics.
out. Yeah.
I'm too busy doing the important job.
Yes.
I'll get to that when I'm done doing my job at my home.
So now your son that just graduated. You've been homeschooling him ever since he was in first grade,
Kindergarten, yeah.
kindergarten,
Yep.
and on the way over here, you also talked about the advantages of homeschooling versus putting a kid in a public school as far as adjusting curriculum
Yep.
to the
There-
personality.
Yep. I have 4 very different children. My first child is a very analytical, wonderful young man who loves history. So when I picked his curriculum, I said, awesome. I've now got curriculum for the other 3 kids. Terrific. Until I hit my artistic, creative, theatrical daughter, who really could care less about history unless it's Egyptian. So I then went and got a curriculum for her, so I'm great. I've got 2 curriculums, we're good. Now I throw in my third child, who is kinesthetic, hands-on,
Yeah.
science, I want to take apart everything. That didn't work for him, so we now go to the third one, and then I have my fourth child, who is, Mom, do I have to take more than one day to finish the new math book you got me? Because I love to read the math books. I want to do that. So
That's good.
you see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I pick what needs to be done. Sometimes it'll overlap, but you're allowed to curtail what you do to the child.
Yeah.
And they get what they need the way they need to get it. And it works out, it allows a lot of kids, especially ones with special needs, to be able to succeed. Because you're not fitting their little round peg in a square hole, you're fitting their little round peg in their round hole.
Right.
And it works.
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the advantages. You can tailor it, whereas in a public school, that kid is got to fight through whatever curriculum that teacher has and whatever that school has bought for that age group, no matter what.
Or go into the special needs classroom,
Right.
and then they have to go through the whole testing process and that kind of stuff, and some need help, but they don't qualify. It can be a mess.
Right.
Now, there are disadvantages. I mean, whenever you make a choice, you have advantages and disadvantages. I can't work full-time. So, you got a lot of sacrifice there.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
That was weird.
So you have, there are disadvantages like that. Disadvantages of I don't have all the technology. I sub 2 days a week in the public schools. I'd love a Promethean board. You know,
What's a Promethean
That's the ones
board?
you can write on. You can put your you can put your computer up there, what's on your computer, and then
Yeah.
you can write on it, and you can have the kids write on it, and you can show video. I'd love to have a board like that.
Yeah.
Really?
I'm not going to sell my husband on that idea because it's
Right.
way too expensive.
Yeah.
I'd love to have the latest latest technology. I would love to have the multimedia. I would love to have the access, being able to be able to pull off some of the classes that they have. But you weigh it out and you decide, every choice you make is going to have a disadvantage and an advantage, and you've
Right.
got to decide which one's better. And for our family, and it's not for everybody. Homeschooling is not for everybody.
Right.
But for our family, that's what's worked best.
Now, the other thing, too, is you had said that there was a bill to try to financially help homeschoolers.
Homeschoolers and private schoolers, there was a tax credit bill. And it sounded wonderful, but I'm a firm believer in he who has the gold makes the rules. And there weren't any strings attached when it came down, but I just could not imagine that there wouldn't be strings attached in the future.
Sure.
So, from what I understand, most of the homeschooling community was just, please leave us alone.
Right.
We'd love a tax break. We'd love to not have to pay for your kids, the school's education plus our own. But if that's what it takes to be left alone and be allowed to do what we want to do and allowed to teach our children the way we feel is best, we'll do it.
Right. Because, well, even if you got the tax break, then you still
Yeah.
have the strings attached.
Exactly.
Because then they'll say, well, this is just how it works.
Yep.
Is they'll say, okay, well, we'll give you a tax break, but in effect, the rest of the town is subsidizing you, and therefore, if you're teaching a religious curriculum, that's the state or the city being forced to subsidize religious curriculum, and therefore you don't qualify.
For example, with common use, okay? When you put your land in common use, you have to have a certain number of acreage. It has to be done in a certain way. You have to jump through the bureaucratic hoops. And we just, again, would like to be left alone.
Yep. So you guys have has that worked anywhere else in the country, or do you know
What, the tax credits?
the tax credits for homeschooling?
I'm not sure. I'm not as up on the rest of the country in terms of those type
Right,
of
right,
bills,
right.
But I would guess that homeschoolers are probably pretty similar in that sense across the board. Is
Yeah.
that we want to be we want to be left alone.
Now, do you have any idea how many homeschoolers there are in New Hampshire?
I think the last
I mean,
number was
how many kids there are being homeschooled in New
I
Hampshire?
think the last number I heard was about 7,000.
7,000.
Yeah, about
More,
7,000.
more than I would have guessed.
A lot of them are being pulled out, and one of the biggest demographics that's being pulled out are special needs kids.
Yeah.
Because the kids are not getting what they need, and the parents are saying, wait a minute, I taught them to do all kinds of things at home, and a one-on-one is going to be a better ratio than a 7-on-1 or a 20-on-1. And so they're pulling them out, and I've been finding, because I have a special need, my bachelor's is in special education and regular education.
Right.
So I do evaluations for a lot of special needs kids, and it's the gambit. You've got your learning disabled kids, autistic children, and the population of special needs kids is bigger. It's about 25% of the school districts
Right.
are coded kids. That's a huge amount of kids. And
Now, is it somebody told me a long time ago that a percentage of those kids that are coded, or it used to be the case, that the schools kind of preferred to code kids because if they coded the kids, that's the high, they get more per pupil, or they actually get more.
there is the federal government refunds the districts. It's usually, I believe, 3 years after the cost is incurred.
Right.
It's not as big a money-making as people have put it out to be, but it
Okay.
definitely, there is money involved when you've got it. But depending on the kid, if you're talking a child who is coded, like a speech or something like that, they don't use a lot of money. But when you've got the kids that have the full one-on-one aid, they have the special, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, you're talking a $60,000 or $70,000 kid.
Yeah.
So it's not as lucrative as it's been led to believe.
Oh, okay, so that's only but those are very rare.
They're
That's
yeah.
not the 25%. Those don't.
no, that's probably, I'd say 5 to 7% probably.
So overall, this experience has been a lot of work for you. You've had to make a lot of sacrifices, And
It's been a lot of fun.
it's been a lot of fun.
been a lot
You're
of
very glad you did it, or?
Yes, yes, I am very glad I did it. My kids and I are close.
Yeah.
We've been able to take vacations in times where we didn't have to fight all the other, because we weren't doing it on the school vacations.
Right.
We could go on field trips if we wanted to. If my husband had the day off on a Friday and he wanted to take the kids somewhere, guess what? We left.
Right.
So it gave us a lot of flexibility. That's another big advantage is, to a large extent, you have a good amount of flexibility to be able to say, okay, we want to go Columbus Day weekend, and we're going to go the week of Columbus Day because my husband has Columbus Day off.
Right.
So he only loses one day of work instead of having to take off, all 5.
Right.
And Disney World is not really populated on Columbus Day weekend, but it's really nice down there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of flexibility in that.
Well, we're running out of time, so I just wanted to end with thanking you, first of all, for coming on tonight and talking about it. 'Cause
My pleasure.
Like I told you, is I really don't know a lot about homeschooling. I have people like her and people in church that are in my community or in church who say, don't vote for this or vote for this. And I say, okay.
Right.
Because my inclination
Yeah.
is to support homeschooling
Yeah.
because that's people who are trying to teach their own kids. I mean, the government should not hinder that in any way. But if somebody wants to get involved, where should they start? What's a organization or place to start the ball rolling?
The easiest thing to do would be to go online to the New Hampshire Homeschooling Coalition, and that will walk you through. And then the next step, I would say, is whatever town they're in, look for local support groups.
And sit down and talk to somebody like you who's been through it so they understand, because it's a huge commitment.
Yep.
that you-
But it's not, though, in that there's just because you homeschool one year doesn't mean you have to homeschool the next.
Right.
So it's done on a year-by-year basis, but you can probably find them in your local church, at your local scout, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. Most people probably know somebody who homeschools or knows somebody who knows somebody who homeschools.
So they're like alcoholics.
No.
On that note,
That's a good analogy, Gary.
yeah, I know.
Thank
I'm
you
trying
very
to help
much. That's
out.
going to go over well with the homeschooling community.
I just lost some votes. Okay, hey Matt, we'll see you next
All
week.
right, Gary, thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
Janine.
much
Thank
again.
you.
Bye, everybody.